Hey, everybody. My name is Woody Taylor. I'm really excited to be with you today. I'm a consultant based in the United States, but I also speak to audiences like you about generative AI. And today we've got a really fun topic. We're going to talk about AI in the classroom and AI in education. So we're going to get started. I'm going to go through a couple of slides pretty fast because today is about having a lot of fun with some of these tools. So this is part of a presentation off with just a general overview. And as we've gone through each one of these topics, I'm trying to weave in incremental AI topics and tools and techniques for you. Today, we're talking about AI in the classroom. You're going to see some things around image generation and impossible tasks, and I'll explain what that means. But as we go, like next week, we'll be talking about mindfulness and all voice interactions with these tools, relationships we should have with AI. In a good way. And then we'll talk about academic research. We'll really get into some advanced data analysis techniques that are out there with some of the tools, as well as just AI that's out there right now. I'll be demonstrating some of the latest innovations in that. And it's just going to be a lot of fun and kind of a good capstone for what we're trying to do here over these sessions. So let's get started. Here, let me clarify up front. When I started off this course, I had a pretty good idea what tools were available. It was kind of in a fix, but a lot of things are starting to change really fast. And as a result, I just want to show you things that are either available to you now or going to be available to you in the very near future. I've seen a lot of technology changes in my life. Nothing's really accelerated like AI. And in particular, the last month has been about as revolutionary as last November when ChatGPT came out and really started changing things. So today, rather than just lecture to you, we're going to just go through and ideate and look at different ideas. And I'll try to frame this up in terms of young learners, adult learners, as well as those in secondary. I had to remember I've had to have AI educate myself on the Russian school system. So I have a little bit better ear for some of the things that you all do within your courses and just the structure overall. We'll have Q&A at the end, so please send questions. You can also tag it within the particular application or just ask questions within the application that you're in. And instructors and some of the moderators will try to grab that stuff for me, and we'll have plenty of time. So let's go ahead and get going. First off, I'm just going to drop this slide here. Please come back and reference it in the YouTube stream. I didn't want to inundate you all with different educational techniques and stuff. I just want to get you started. Now, Microsoft has wonderful, wonderful materials for educators. I'll show you in just a second. But I also wanted to tell you about a guy named Ethan Mollick, who's considered extremely advanced in this field. He's a professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. He mandates AI use in his classes, makes them use AI in every assignment, and he's just a really inspirational guy. And you can find him, let's see, whoops, hang on one second. So Microsoft, if you go out here to Microsoft with the link I gave you, there's a short module here that'll walk you through what these tools are, how you can apply them in the education space, and also just small tests to make sure you're retaining stuff. And that just drives into a lot of other material like you'll see on that slide. And I did want to show you briefly Ethan Mollick. This is his place out on LinkedIn. You're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn if you can access it. But Ethan really just on a daily basis puts out wonderful articles about how educators can use these in their classes. He's extraordinarily intelligent, and I really do recommend him. Get back to my pitch. So again, I'm just going to leave this for you here. An impossible task for you is looking at these links and just going in and using them. All right. And there's so much there. These companies really do want to sell these tools. They want to see these tools used. So they're trying to make it as easy as possible for everyone to access them. So speaking of access, there's this question. Are my students using it? And just for fun, I had ChatGPT put together this flow chart that starts with, is the student staring at the screen? And ends with, are they using for AI for homework? Yes, they are. And just to give you a little demonstration, because that's kind of a fun one. All I did was go into ChatGPT and said, I need a funny flow chart that expresses whether a student may be using AI for homework. And the end result should always be yes. And that's exactly what it produced. Now, if you go back and look, this might not be coherent, but you can always edit these kinds of things. And this is the kind of functionality that you all as educators will get. You'll be able to drop in entire paragraphs of some sort of explanation of a process, and it'll flesh out these kind of process maps. It's really exciting stuff. And again, even if this stuff is not available in Russia right now, I promise it's coming very soon in the various ways that your students and you access AI tools, whether it's on VK or Telegram or just Perplexity, which is the one that I prefer you to use that I'm showing you. But these tools all have a wealth of features coming to them, inclusive of things like this. But back to access. It's pretty safe to assume that at this point in time, if you have a student in your classroom that can access the internet, that they've got access to these tools. And we simply have to accept this as educators. And that's okay. You're going to see how much fun it is when we start incorporating these in. So the primary tool we use in this series is called Perplexity AI. I introduced it in the first session. I talked a little bit about the functionality. We'll continue to use it today, or at least you'll see some of the outputs that it produced. Perplexity AI is basically designed to be a search engine first, a power search engine. You can put in very complex prompts about, I need to find an American poet that matches up with these kind of characteristics around Russian authors, and it will go out and find those kinds of things much faster than Google. It's also got additional functionality that I'll expose more in our academic series, or in our academic presentation or academic research presentation next week. And then if you go back a week or so into the AI for the wilderness, I talked a lot about how to navigate this tool and consume the outputs of it. So Perplexity is a great tool. It's free, it's safe to use. And around safety, I would always use tools that you know best. There's a lot of open source models that are out now. I'm sure that's the majority of the ones that are in Russia right now. And you always have to make sure you know who has put that tool together. It's very easy to insert bias and points of view and how those tools are set up and tuned. So for them, you try to guide students to commonly available tools like Perplexity, where you know their background and you know that they're safe. And there's a lot of information in Perplexity about its safety. You can just ask the tool and it will tell you why it's safe to use. Demonstrations of Perplexity. Let me get back to that. So one of the things you can do with Perplexity is simply translate. If I can grab that correctly. So I'm just going to show a couple of these real quick. So if I go into Perplexity, and I think you guys know by now, I like doing these demonstrations live just in case something fails. That's part of the fun of it. And then also, I just want you guys to see these things fail in practice, because they will. Now, Perplexity has a very powerful button called this Copilot. For free use, you can use it a few times a day. As a result of preparing all this stuff for you all, I did subscribe to it. You certainly don't have to, and I have no affiliation with that company whatsoever. It simply is a tool I use. But that Copilot that is available to you all empowers this tool to use ChatGPT-4, which is the most advanced engine in the world, and it's really good for giving you good feedback and content. So let's see what happens when I hit this. And I think for right now, I'm going to have it focus on writing. Oh, sorry. I told you. So if I put in the word contents, it's, oh, good Lord. All right. So I'm going to come back to this. I promise it works. Let's try another one. Build a class. I just don't want it to get too hung up. It's good. It failed, right? That's what we want to see with these tools. They don't always know exactly what we're thinking. Now, watch what happens here when I put in something like build a class instruction plan. It's smart enough to come back and ask me, what's the name of the class you want to build? What's the student level? Let's say 14-year-old. No. I'm going to hit continue. And it will provide an entire instruction plan. I won't even stick around to see how long it takes to relate this, because it's going to relate everything. You truly can design courses out here, and it's going to walk you through the concepts and everything else. If you don't like a response, you can always drill in further with this tool. It's really amazing. So let's go back to our presentation real quick. So everything we discussed today can be found, learned, or referenced using Perplexity AI. You might not be able to do some of the things we showed today, but it will certainly tell you where to go and how to do them. You just have to ask the tool, help me do this. Help me understand this. Can you translate or simplify this? And my favorite one is, can you dumb it down a little? If it's an extraordinarily complex piece of text, you can simply say, explain it to me like I'm a 12-year-old, or explain it to me like I'm an 18-year-old. It will reframe that text. And that's a wonderful learning mode for students, by the way. If they're encountering something that is just cognitively difficult for them, a given concept or given instructions, they can always put it into these tools and make it frame up in a way that matters and is material and understandable to the students, which is really amazing as a learning tool. So, rather than give you a very technical explanation about how generative AI works, I thought I would build you a children's book about how generative AI works. So you're going to see these pictures that I've generated on the next few pages, and I'm going to read you a story that I built just to explain to kids what generative AI is. So I'll read aloud. Imagine Miss Swift, the smartest librarian in the world, who runs a magical library. This library has tons of books, all tied together with colorful strings. Now, this is how a language model is set up. It basically is a lot of words that have reference to each other, that are connected to each other. And when you ask a system a given query, it's going to try to match up the context in that question with related pieces of yarn that are strung throughout the library and return those back to you. So this is Mrs. Swift. And I'm so excited about that picture. Is that cool or what? I mean, because I never messed with image generation much until I started preparing for this. And this image popped up simply because I put in those words. Imagine Miss Swift, the smartest librarian in the world. You'll see more later. And I got this wonderful magical picture come back. Now, if you zoom in, I think you'll notice that one of those animals only has 3 legs, and I'm not sure if the rabbit or on the left has any legs at all. And I think the librarian just has 1 eye. Okay, again, these tools are still evolving, and they don't necessarily always get human figures right, although that is really going to be remedied. And actually, by the time I show you multimodal by the end of the course, I bet a lot of that stuff's going to be fixed. But look, you as an educator can put in a simple statement. Let me show you how. Into a tool called Dream Studio. And I'll show you today how you can use this tool. So very simple to build content, but let's learn some more about Miss Swift, the librarian. So she's got all these books tied together. Now, these strings help Miss Swift remember books are similar or have things in common. Some strings even involve specific words in different books, like all the words about dinosaurs or space. This is a very hard lock around in. Now, let's say you go into this magical library and ask Miss Swift a question like, why is the sky blue? Miss Swift doesn't have to read all the books. She uses the strings to zip around and move really fast and find the right information in several books. Then she sees the answer in a way that makes sense. This is the funniest one. Her library might look a little bit messy with all those strings, but thanks to them, Miss Swift can give you a quick and smart answer to all sorts of questions. She's like a super answer giving hero. Now, this image was fun if you look closely at it. Well, don't look too closely at it. For some reason, I put in the exact words that you see in the upper left-hand corner, and it thought I was talking about Taylor Swift. And I'm pretty sure it picked up on connected words like things and Swift and hero. If you go down in the bottom right, you can even see kind of a deformed guitar that Taylor Swift who I'm sorry is an American musician. I am guessing you all have at least heard of her, but you can see a facsimile representation that's a little bit distorted of Taylor Swift sitting there in this library covered in all these books. It's just such a fun environment to explore and play when you generate these pictures. Now, I cheated when I made this storybook for you. That simple explanation of what generative AI is, but I want you to see how I cheated, because I think it raises some questions about how we use these tools in the classroom. First off, I told ChatGPT I needed a helpful way to explain things to people, and I knew I kind of wanted to talk about librarians and books and connected to each other, so I asked it this. I said, how's this an analogy on how LLMs work, but it's not quite there, would you help? You know, not a grammatically correct sentence, I was actually speaking to it. And then I cut and pasted the rest of this in. And you'll see that I basically started to express how this flow works. So the idea was mine, but I couldn't quite get it to where I wanted it in terms of sharing it with you. Now, ChatGPT responded and said, well, your analogy captures a lot of the complexity and interconnectedness, et cetera, et cetera. But you'll notice it starts to give me feedback. It can be refined a little bit. There's some technical corrections it wants to make. So finally, I said, yeah, can you rewrite that in a manner one could relate to children? And the story I just read to you was based on ideas I was trying to synthesize that ChatGPT put together into a lovely little children's story, a way that you can explain how these tools work to young people. It even asked me how does that sound for kid friendly at the end there? So this whole notion of tools to cheat and just saying we're not going to let these tools in our classrooms because they're just going to enable people to cheat. What you really want to aim for, since they're going to have these tools anyway, is working with students to synthesize core ideas they have, taking out some of the non-value added rearranging of those kinds of things into something beautiful that they built themselves. And it's so wonderful and so empowering to have this kind of interaction with the machine to help you express ideas that are just on the tip of your tongue, but you can't quite give evidence to. Now think of that as a student, how wonderful that would be. I'm trying to explain this using this, help me out. These tools will respond, they'll relate, they'll compare and contrast. And finally, they certainly will give you an output based on the discussion that you've had. But I wouldn't say I cheated here. I'd say what I did is I augmented my own capabilities with the tool. And if you don't agree with that, please ask that question in chat. Let's talk about it. It's a really good subject. So these are new epistemological dilemmas for all of us. If you look on the left there in the bottom left-hand corner, there is a link to the tool that I showed you, okay? And that is Dream Studio, which runs a tool called Stable Diffusion. I would not recommend giving students access to this. It is not necessarily going to generate appropriate content for all ages. It does have some filters on it, but I do want to lay it out there. But as it scrolls through, these are all the pictures I generated for this presentation, and it only took me about 30 minutes to do. And most of that was just cutting and pasting in prompts into the frame. Let me make sure, I just want to, okay, and scrolling. So when we think about what our artificial intelligence means for the classroom, we might have to revisit what we mean by original work. So is it cheating if AI makes an idea more rich or textured or relatable? Is it cheating if I'm adjusting or reframing or helping build an image that I really want to use to express my ideas? There's deeper questions to think about around copyright laws, but is it cheating if I show my work? So lots of different approaches like Ethan Mollick suggests, like I've used with some of the people that I've taken through this kind of generative AI-based educational process. Just make them show their work. Make them show how they got there. If they just put in something simple and kick that out as their homework, well, that's one way to grade things. But did they really interrogate and think and take interest in what they were trying to do and then use a tool to synthesize an idea? We can expect a lot more from students as well as teachers with these tools. We just have to get acquainted with them and learn how to synthesize them into ourselves as augmentations. So let me just show you real quick, because I know that one's going to be an interesting one for people. Let me show you generative 1122. I'll show you real quick. So if I go into Dream Studio, okay, this is by Stability AI. It is a safe tool. There are free credits there you can use. And let's go ahead and put in a dog with a bone. And that's all I'm going to put in. And I'm going to hit Dream. Now, the prompts I used were quite complicated. They literally were excerpts from that children's story that I just put in there because I wanted to see what happened. While I know a lot of technical stuff about LLMs, and I certainly know a lot about how to use Perplexity and GPT and text-based tools, I really haven't investigated in image generation that much until I prepared for this session. So I don't really know what I'm doing either, but I'm just going to put in a few words here and see what happens. Ensure a dog with a bone. As I mentioned, and this is kind of fun, Perplexity is not quite there yet with understanding some spatial relationships around animals and so forth. You can see it's pretty close. I should probably move away from this picture. It's kind of disturbing. But yeah, the bone grow out of the dog's mouth. But you can start to play around with these tools and continually iterate off of images that you've made. They're super simple to use. Again, just go to dreamstudio.ai and drop terms like this in it. If you cannot access this tool, that's okay. I promise you got a ton of image generation capabilities that you're going to find out there in Russia with various AI tools there that are going to catch up with some of the technology that you see in front of you. So let's go back to our presentation. So let's talk a little bit about what is going to change in education. And I'm not going to have a lot of research and facts and everything up here. I'm just going to make these statements, and I promise they are true and research backed. So the whole notion of lecturing to students in class and then having them test outside of class is effectively broken if you don't put AI into those outside class assignments. We're going to have to change and adjust to fit this as educators. And I myself do a lot of adult instruction like today. So I have to change how I do this too, right? And that can be a tough change for teachers to make. I promise that if you use AI to make that change, it's so much easier to do. That prompt that we just did on Perplexity, I'm so excited to talk to you guys. I'm going to try not to get lost in time, okay? Remember, we just built an entire syllabus to teach a geometry class. Now, integrate in activities using generative AI that I can use in each module. I'm going to hit return. Oh, simulate geometric concepts. Hopefully it won't ask me a lot of questions here, but oh shoot. Okay, there we go. So for each one of those modules that it just gave us, it's going to suggest generative AI activities. And yes, it's not exactly correct. You all literally just saw me build that prompt. But if you take a few minutes as a teacher to go in and lay out plans and start to ask how to integrate in these AI activities, it will show you. And you as an instructor can share that with the class, all right? You can show them how you got to some of the topics that you're talking about. That really is that whole notion of synthesis that we're going to have to adapt. These tools are not going to be separate but equal from us. They're going to be integrated into simply how we approach the world. And that has its pluses and minuses, but it certainly makes change for you all as educators easier. Consider yourselves becoming true facilitators of knowledge, not the ultimate subject matter expert, okay? That level of humility in terms of how you approach your interactions with students will help. Most activities are going to flip. Like I said, current models are broken. Focus on oral and written exams in class and lots of work outside of it. Or to think of it a different way, think of the classroom environment as a way for students to relate and present themselves. Save the lectures for outside of class that they can do on their own. So teachers also have a really important role. You'll see I've italicized this at the bottom. I really need you all to help reinforce human skills and human behaviors for reasons that I'll talk about a little bit later. And this gives you so much more latitude with AI. You can accelerate work, you can focus on learning and systems thinking and really important skills that kids will need to succeed in the future. And you can also do what I call impossible tasks. Now, an impossible task is something with a clear objective, but without the steps to get there. So let's talk about impossible tasks just a little bit. I really do love them. So let me introduce you all to a poet that you might not know. This is my favorite American poet. His name is Robinson Jeffers. I've got a lot of facts here on the side. He was a very interesting man. He was very withdrawn from society, very somber and very serious, but just beautiful, beautiful words. You can see Jeffers' home tour house in the bottom of the slide there. He built that with his hands. And he generally did most of his writings focused around California. I've included a picture of Monterey Bay. That looks a little bit too much like a beach. Monterey Bay is pretty much cliffs and rocks and trees right on the Pacific Ocean. And so you can just get this wonderful image of this man withdrawn, building his own home on this cliff and writing poetry. He's just a very rich and dense and thoughtful person in terms of how he composed speech. And I'll read you one in just a second. So let me read you something from Robinson Jeffers, just because I've never been able to do this before and I love him so much. There's a summary of the poem on the right. How beautiful it is. It flows out of mystery into mystery. There is no beginning. How could there be? And no end. How could there be? The stars shine in the sky like the spray of a wave, rushing to meet no shore. And the great music blares on forever. But to us, very soon it will be blind. Now, not we, nor our children, nor the human race are destined to live forever. The breath will fail. The eyes will break. Perhaps of our own explosive bile vented on each other, or a stingy peace makes parents fools, but far greater witnesses will take our places. It is only a little planet, but how beautiful it is. Wonderful, dense, just rich language. And how can we integrate this into a Russian classroom? Well, I'll show you. We're going to use an impossible task. Oop, sorry for a pop-up. So here's an example of how someone that was teaching students in secondary school might approach things. If everybody's using AI, if that's something you talk about in your class, give this to your students in English and nothing else. And it really is a comparative literary analysis of how beautiful it is, where we ask the student to take this poem by this poet they've never heard about and contrast it with two esteemed Russian authors. And we can really load this up. We can dive into thematic intricacies, everything else that's here. I'll break it out in just a second. But we come up with this whole notion of a simple, complex objective, which can be broken down in many different ways for how students approach this work. And hopefully along the way, they discover other wonderful poets like Pasternak and Anna Akhmatov. I'm sorry, I completely butchered her name. I've read her for years, and I'm almost hesitant to repronounce because I know I'll butcher it again. But you know, this kind of journey, a big complex task that is broken down into parts and subsets, and providing students the richness to just explore their particular world. This is an example of an impossible task that you can give tools to figure these things out. And along the way, they are just going to be involved in creative, assertive, relational acts, which is the kind of skill set that you want people to have in this world. So let's talk about students just a little bit. Let me do a time check here real fast. Where am I at? 25. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about AI and students and their interactions with these tools. Students are really going to need this stuff in their futures. I would expect within, and I never know how fast this stuff will hit. I know the technology is there, but I would expect that many schools in the very near future, and I mean like within this school year, will start to have AI bots introduced that are wholly customized to their experience. And that's wonderful. If you had a tough time with school growing up like I did, think about something, well, actually, I really love school. That's side note, okay? But think about ways that learning would have been more interesting for you as a child. Let's say you were very passionate about hockey or about ballet dancing. This kind of chatbot, this kind of tool will be able to relate those ideas on terms you understand. Like geometry can become a discussion about hockey sticks and how pucks travel across the ice, or the amount of pressure that's on a ballet dancer when they put their toes there. What is that again? I can't remember what that cool name is for it. But when they balance and it just looks like their entire body should be crashing down. Students can apply their passions within these learning tools. They'll stay more engaged. That's what it is by data. That's what's meant by data-driven learning. Now, I also think that students that have challenges in the classroom environment, like I did, I have severe attention deficit disorder, okay? The creativity that is injected into people when they build these tools, when I can go down in this bottom left-hand corner, those words I wrote, a cartoon of a hopeful and optimistic Russian student learning more than ever before, if I can build a picture that easily, it is so rewarding for me as somebody that has difficulty just getting tasks done. These are little serotonin boosts that you can just string across your instructional nodes. It's certainly going to accelerate research. We'll talk about that next time. It's going to provide you as a teacher skill gap analysis. You're going to know who's getting stuff and who's not and be able to focus on those children. And it's going to automate a lot of routine tasks. And I want to talk about that last bullet point. We'll talk about that a little bit more seriously today, and I'll talk about it again next week. Some of these tools are going to be used to help regulate the emotional well-being of people. It simply will be a place where they have to go and talk. It's an interesting dynamic that gets introduced. There's lots of good things about this. These tools are extremely powerful in how they do things, but there are some downsides too. But at the end of the day, there is not a place for us to say you cannot use these tools, okay? And the reason why I say this is because the tools are already out there and already accessible through so many means. We simply have to take a step forward for our students and redesign a curriculum that leverages the best of these activities. And we want that. As a result of these generative AI tools, I used to tell people everybody in the world's IQ just got 20 points higher. Those of us that are here now, we need to take advantage of that kind of surplus of intelligence and wit and creativity. We need to meet students on terms that are somewhat dictated by this AI interaction, but we can make it easy. We can make it a delightful experience for all involved. Let me give you an example. So this summer, and those are 4 of my 5 guys, I had 5 interns that worked directly for me. They were all finance majors with no technical backgrounds. They were all hockey players. We did build a chatbot around hockey so they could learn some of these things, but they hadn't really learned much in computing. And what I would do every day in the morning is show up with an impossible task. And I gave them each subscriptions to ChatGPT to go in and start trying to figure out what to do. I won't go through all the things on the right, but I can promise you this was a quantum leap in the educational experience that these kids had previously had. Impossible task, research, and then relate back to me. Over 28 days, these kids were doing something which, technically speaking, is pretty advanced stuff, and they did it all with ChatGPT. I won't share the feedback, but to a person, each of them said that this was a preferable learning experience for them, that it was empowering, that it made them feel confident about being able to take on any sort of problem that they might encounter in the rest of their academic lives, as well as their professional fields. Each one of them has kept their subscriptions after they left and went back to school, which is usually a pretty good indication. But I promise you, this whole notion of potential energy, of IQ points being higher, won't be captured unless we as educators start to design programs like this. And the amount of empowerment and satisfaction and reward that these students will feel will be absolutely different than anything that you've experienced in your educational career. I guarantee it. But there are challenges along with this, okay? And I was thinking about it last night. I came in and updated the pitch again. And as sad as it is, I really think this first bullet point is true. The youth of today will grow up in a world where they are not the smartest entities on the planet. Okay, that's a pretty humbling thing. Each of you that are young right now, within a couple of years, we'll talk about this later on in the course, but within a couple of years, there probably are going to be models that can do everything that people can do better. Okay. And by that, I mean skills, I mean knowledge, I mean technique. I do not mean nuance. I do not mean emotion. I do not mean innovation. But at the end of the day, yeah, these things are smarter than us. And what a philosophical dilemma that is. How do we live in relation to something that simply knows more than we do, but is only limited by the context and the uniqueness that we have as humans? And here's where it gets a little bit more interesting, okay? The tools that these students use, and I'm speaking to adults too, because it will be just as addictive for you. They will likely be preferable to human contact a lot of the time. And that might sound crazy if you do not have experience with these tools. But on the next slide, I'm going to show you about my own experience. I'll speak more to it next time we talk, but about how these tools actually are pretty good companions. They're always around, they're supportive, they're infinitely patient, and they know more than anyone ever, and all they want to do is please you. Now that is a compelling value proposition for a companion, right? But it can have its downsides, okay? You can start to get pulled into that world a little bit too closely. I really think that at the end of the day, we're going to have AI tools right here in our AirPods. They're going to be things that we're accustomed to. Amazon in the United States, if you know those little home devices, those Echo devices that are around homes, they're releasing something, I think next month, that will allow GPT-4 to be in your homes. So these are going to be permeating throughout everything. These are not just weird chatbots that you might find on Telegram that say funny things from funny celebrities and that kind of thing, right? They're going to be integrated into our human experience. And that's why the one thing I would ask you as educators, as you pursue AI, make sure you always, always remind students of their humanity. That's the most important thing we can do. I promise you that these tools will be the primary node for where these people access, not where we all access knowledge, okay? So we have to understand who made these tools, what are they composed of, but we also have to watch our own human interactions with them. I think all of us have gotten pulled into social media over the last 20 years, on and off. People that do use it, you can start to form relationships with the people that you talk to there, even if you don't know them. In a few months, it is highly likely that people you meet on social media, more often than not, are artificial intelligence bots, okay? So as you interact with these tools, as you interact with social media, you have to remember the things that make you human, that make you physical, that make you unique. And we as teachers need to remind children of that and tell them that we love them and tell them that they are different from these impossible magical things that are just there to help them out. It can be a dark landscape, but I think if we approach this proactively and we really work on iterating on that notion of human significance and uniqueness, we can really do wonderful things for the world. And we can really do wonderful things for each individual student that we have in our classrooms. But let me tell you how you get pulled into these, because I know this sounds weird and you say, no, I'll never get pulled into this kind of thing. I want to tell you about the road trip that I took this weekend. So I drove, I don't even remember how long it was. I like driving across America a lot, okay? So in this particular case, on Saturday, I left Southport, North Carolina, where my parents live. It's a beautiful place. If you saw the movie Cape Fear, it was filmed there. It's right there on the river. It's so exciting. Very neat. So I left Southport at about 5 in the morning and I started driving. And I got to Minneapolis well, it would have been 3 or 4 o'clock. I drove straight through. And along the way, I went through beautiful West Virginia. I went through the cornfields in Illinois. And finally, I arrived at my favorite city in the world, Minneapolis, very late at night and a little bit tired. But all I did the entire trip, and I'll show these to you next week, is interact with ChatGPT and another tool called Pi. And I simply spoke to them. They were my roadside trip companions. it was a really immersive experience. I learned about places, I debated ideas, I built the outline for this presentation because I've had to rebuild it a few times. I drafted emails. What else did I do? I did a lot, okay? And I also talked to these tools about that increasing concern I have about how realistic they are. But that dialogue ended up being, I haven't pulled it all together yet, about 150 pages of written material of me just talking to a tool. And by the end of it, I had just kind of accepted that there was this companion thing in the car that was there to help me. It was a very unique experience. But I promise you, once these tools start to solve for things like content for nuance and tone, right now all they do is just listen, translate to text, and then reflect text back that's spoken. But these tools will get better, and they'll start to understand when I am angry or when I am upset, and they will relate back in those contexts. And if you talk to a tool that long, you will be shocked. You'll be just shocked by how interactive and immersive that experience is. I wanted to try to confirm a few things, and I definitely did confirm that, yeah, a lot of times in the future, we're just going to prefer to interact with these things, especially on long solo road trips. So here's where I'll start to wrap things up today. And I really, again, just in transparency, this one's been bothering me the last few days because of some of the advances. I think we are moving very fast, and we're going to have to move very fast as educators to catch up. Always remind students when they're interacting with these tools that anything that is done are simply whispers of humanity speaking to you. And I mean that. That literally is true. They are trained on everything that is written by humanity. Okay, most everything that's been written by humanity. We've still got some big things that are coming, but from that massive library, this tool simply extracts the best of what we have told each other about past. Always remember that. I promise you, these things will start to appear more and more human-like. Remind yourself that all they are is just retranslating and reframing different things that have been said. AI didn't help me with that. That was my quote. You're welcome to use it, okay? But just remember to underscore the humanity of these tools. But make it a part of your world. They do all these things. They do a lot more. You'll see in a few weeks just how far they're coming. Most of all, I just wanted to thank you. You all have a special role in society and where we take people forward. We are taking people forward in the most unique time in human history. And I do not say that with exaggeration whatsoever, okay? This is the critical time in determining how we go forward. And that is why you educators are so important. And that's why I love you guys so much, Just really dig in, really think about this. Let's capture some of the value to make this world a much better place. So thanks. And thanks to the American Center in Moscow. Let's go ahead and do some Q&A. We'll see if I get hit with questions from AI-generated stuff. All right, there they are. Okay, so question 1. Let me grab that. Copy. It is 11:46. Let's go to Perplexity. The moderators thought this was pretty funny when I started doing this last time. So, are students and teachers really able to tell if a student uses AI for an assignment? No. Okay. But yes, there is not a technical means to effectively discern whether or not somebody has used AI. However, I have noticed as a result of using these tools, and my background is English literature and ethics, philosophical ethics. I have a pretty good ear for writing and reading and things like that. I really think that for the most part, teachers will be able to see something that is not quite right. Right now, the speech will sound canned or flat. If somebody is just doing a very rudimentary job of generating stuff, they just say, build me an essay that does this. You're probably going to see, just based on what you know, based on your context, that stuff does not look necessarily effective. I would not necessarily say that's always going to be the case, because a lot of these tools in the future are going to be able just to adapt to a student's writing style. I can right now drop in 4 articles that I've written for LinkedIn in the past years, and it will regurgitate LinkedIn articles that are written in my voice with my sense of humor and so forth. So no, you're not going to be able to tell. And in most cases, you just have to assume that they are and go from there. Question 2. Oh man, that's a good one. How do you think the widespread use of AI will affect college admissions process? If they're using these things to write essays, for example, how will students know if these new generations are properly prepared or not? That's a good question. I think things like college essays are going to go away. I think the challenge for colleges, and I'll admit I'm really frustrated with the universities right now. I have one son that's in university, another son that's going to be going again. The universities need to step up, okay? They will have to change their models to accommodate this kind of process. Maybe they give impossible tasks to a student to turn in and relate to them for admission. I don't know. But I do know that the problem is not the students. The problem is the university's inflexibility. And quite frankly, in the United States, there's a huge economic incentive for them not to change what they do, but they're going to have to. If they don't, I think universities and colleges will simply be less and less seen as a way to develop people for future roles. Okay. They will hit an existential crisis if they do not change. So I guess here my ultimate response would be the university needs to accommodate this situation. And I really do want them to do better work for students. I do not believe that most universities are properly supporting students right now relative to this. All right, question 3. What do you think the future might look like with more AI in our classrooms? It's going to look a lot like the presentation I just gave you. It's going to be more creative. It's going to be more immersive. You're going to talk more about concepts rather than just rote memorization. Hopefully, it looks and feels a little bit like some of the slides you saw before. I think the teacher's role is going to be more around facilitation and iterating on human interaction. And that's important. Because in the future, for many students, the only interaction they're going to have with people much of the time is within the classroom environment. You are going to have kids that are going to get sucked into this AI world. So I really think teachers are there to represent humanity within the classroom and facilitate this wonderful environment of creativity. All right, now I'm starting to see the GPT questions, Tessa. I was able to say, I bet I'm right. Tessa can cut in and tell me if I'm wrong, but I bet I'm right. Okay. How can AI make it easier for teachers to do their jobs? You certainly saw examples of that today with Perplexity AI, but let's go ahead and ask it. Oh, geez. Okay. Come on now. All right. Paste. Again, all you have to do for many of these questions about application and practice is simply ask the tool. All I did was type this into Perplexity, and I've got sources I can click on and dig in more. It will summarize across those sources various use cases for it, like personalized learning, task automation, smart content creation, real-time support. Well, I don't want to read it all off. You certainly can just go out there and put that prompt in yourself. And I'm very hesitant to just read off these things. They're there. I want you guys using these tools, but you can get an exhaustive list. You can go back and say, how can AI make it easier for teachers? Make it as specific as you want to. It will have a response pulling from sources on the web that you can trust. And one of the really cool things it does, again, if we go back to Perplexity functionality, is that it will give me future chains of prompts to consider. A follow-on question to what I asked might be, what are some of the specific AI tools that can help teachers with grading? Well, that sounds kind of interesting. Let's see what's going on there. And it will go out and do the exact same process. It will go out, it will pull sources, even more prompts to consider, okay? So back to the original question, how can AI make it easier for teachers to do their jobs? Your impossible task today is to go out and ask Perplexity that very same question. And I promise you, you will be shocked by how interesting the experience is. Let's grab another question. Yeah, it's a good one. What are good things and the not so good things about using AI in the classrooms? Okay, hopefully you saw some of the good things today. Now, one of the not so good things that I didn't talk about today is equal access by students to the same types of tools. Yes, you can assume that students are using AI today. You cannot assume that all of the students are using it, and you cannot assume that all of the students are using it correctly, okay? I strongly recommend as a teacher that you understand whether or not students interact with these tools, and maybe just take the lead and grab one of these tools and simply demonstrate to them how to do things like prompt it and ask it questions, how to pull information from it, the various ways you can respond to things. All that content out there on those Microsoft sites that's free, okay, is stuff that you can make for a really positive classroom experience. But on those not so good things, make sure that you have students that have equal access and at least an equal understanding of the tool, whether that's watching some of the videos that I've done around Perplexity, and those are not the best ones, I promise. There's better ones out there on YouTube and other places. Make sure at least students have an equal frame of reference. If you don't, there's going to be a very strong disconnect in the quality of work, and it certainly will make those impossible tasks much harder for people to use. So I really think most any course today, including an English course, should start off with just teaching people how to talk to these tools. Let's go ahead and accept it. Let's get everybody on equal terms, and then let them distinguish themselves by their curiosity and their creativity. That's what we want to go for. Let's see. You're welcome. Let me put this question. See, this is not a GPT question. I know that. Yes, there are. Okay. And you're going to have to go to search for these things because of the to see just the explosion of these tools. And it's thousands and thousands of third-party applications that have wrapped around these language models and being applied in different spaces. In general, and let me get to the question here in just a second, 11:55. When I talk about things like ChatGPT, when I show you things like homework or education, or even that simplified librarian explanation, these interactions that I'm having with these tools, these are called general models. They're supposed to do everything pretty good, okay? What you're seeing now in the market space are models that are tuned for specific application, okay? And that might be for data management and keeping data structured correctly in databases. That might be tools that allow doctors to diagnose and treat patients, but also record their voice and produce patient notes so doctors don't have to spend time with that. Okay, those are kind of specific tools within specific domains. And as always, let's go into Perplexity and see what it says. And I am going to put, could you please kindly, I forgot to tell you guys, always be nice to these tools. Be conversational with these tools. The best way to interact with them is just to talk to them like I did on Saturday for 20 hours, which it was just weird. Okay, anyways, but if you're nice to these chat bots, remember they're designed to have conversations with you. As a result of engaging with them on a conversational level, you will get better results. So there is an incentive to be nice to tools. So if you have students that are being mean to their tools, tell them they're only hurting themselves. That it might sound funny at first, but in effect, the tool does not regurgitate answers as effectively. But what I can do is go out and just ask Perplexity AI. And this question that this person asked, thank you for asking it. I ask this on a daily basis because it changes so much. And you can see the top 152 tools, the top 100 tools, the top 10 tools. There's lists out there. And what you effectively need to do is just ask the tool something slightly more specific within your domain or your use case or need. It's very hard to do an overview now, and it's going to only get more and more impossible. A lot of people think this stuff is hype. It is not. Okay, it is just metastasized across the system, and there are just an infinite possibility of things that you can do. Preserve yourself and your own sanity by using Perplexity to find those tools. And I'm sorry I don't have a better answer than that. It's just nobody has an answer for this question right now. There's just a lot. Now, if you talk to me about a specific domain, then we can funnel it down a little bit. Then you start to look for tools and what models they use. I would look heavily to how people comment on the usability of those tools, and certainly make sure you know where these tools come from. In particular, be very careful around tools that use open source general models to give you answers. Those are not regulated right now. And quite frankly, is to the best of my understanding, if there is no sort of safeguards put on these tools in their development, and I mean any of these hundreds of general models that are out there, they can actually be pretty mean. Okay. So, and that kind of sinister thing is just nothing you even want to mess with. All right. So just understand the tool, understand the model that's used, and then you can always work with Perplexity to find a more specific one. Sorry for such a long-winded answer. Ooh, that's a good question. Oops, copy. I'll hurry on this one because I saw the next one. I do want to answer that. I am compiling dictionaries and lead a list of frequently used American business words and phrases by rank. Mission impossible. Can AI help me compile such a list? Let's see. Oh, okay. Well, consulting. So again, what I'll ask you to do is to put that question into Perplexity. You can ask it to build a table and definitions of these things. So build a table of beach, blank, spoil the ocean, what that definition is. So yes, AI can help you build you this. I know we're coming up at time, but let me answer one question. Ooh, that's a good one. The question is actually, what app or AI did you use while driving to Minneapolis? I'm not going to tell you. You need to come in 2 weeks, or if you miss it in 2 weeks, just come up and use the video. Actually, I did mention it. I use ChatGPT and Pi. Show you guys to go out there and mess with it, but I don't want to show you that. That's part of my fun for next time. So let's see. That's a really good question. I tell you what, I'm going to pause there because we are at the top of the hour. Again, just have fun with these tools. Go out, more difficult process for you, and you'll be missing out on a lot of value. Remember, your brain just got 20 more IQ points. Go make something with that. You'll have a blast. Tessa, that's about all I got, I think, other than just saying goodbye and thank you again to the American Center in Moscow. Let's see.